We are joined by Dr. Helena Ivanov, Associate Fellow, the Henry Jackson Society, live from Belgrade, Serbia. Thank you for joining us on the broadcast. We are looking at the 100 days war between Israel and Hamas militants in Gaza. Ivana, according to reports, Biden is running out of patience with Netanyahu over failing to meet its administration's requests in the Gaza war. While we have seen a public display of support by the United States to Israel since the beginning of the war, in the last in wake of rising civilian casualties in Gaza, how do you see the next phase of war after 100 days?
Well, I think that we will overall continue to see the United States supporting Israel. Of course, this is a very difficult situation. A huge number of Biden voters obviously have expressed their sentiments towards Palestine and are pressuring the United States to show less support towards Israel. Given that this is an election year, we can completely understand why this might be a particularly difficult position for the current President Biden. However, I think that if we look at the official statements made by the United States officials, they have been very clear and very unequivocal in their support towards Israel. They have given us no real reason to think that this support will decrease or change in the coming months. So I think the official U.S. stance will pretty much remain the same, which means Israel has the right to defend itself. The United States will support Israel in exercising this right to defend itself. And of course, the United States will continue to insist that Israel tries and decreases the number of civilian casualties as much as possible. So I do not foresee any major changes in the coming months.
All right, Helena. Also, Netanyahu has proposed a wartime budget with proposals for major cuts across ministries. You know, no sooner did he announce the major cuts in his budget, we saw discontent among his ministers. Two of his ministers storming out of the meeting. And you know, the same happened on Saturday when Defense Minister walked off from another meeting with Netanyahu. You know, Netanyahu has refrained from taking a direct responsibility for the Hamas attack, but is there a growing discontent among his own men?
Look, even before the 7th of October attacks and the Hamas-Israel war, Netanyahu's position was really complicated. There were massive protests against Netanyahu, and many were displeased and discontent with Netanyahu's rule. So I think some of that discontent that predates the 7th of October attacks is still present and is still out there. And I think we're seeing bits and pieces of that in these latest budget conversations. I think, in addition, having budget conversations is always complicated, always difficult, always leads to, disagreements among ministers. And when you add the war context to that, of course, it was reasonable to expect that these conversations were not going to be easy. However, I do not foresee that these difficulties in agreeing upon the budget will, cost Netanyahu his power or really, damage his control too much. And the reason for that is basically that at the moment, there are no viable alternatives. And if you are to trust the polls in Israel at the moment, other political parties would just not perform as well as Netanyahu would. So I think whilst disagreements might be frustrating for Mr. Netanyahu, at this point in time, I do not think that this discontent can really substantially jeopardize his political position.
Dr. Helena Ivanov, thank you for joining us on the broadcast, and we continue to track all those latest developments on ground.